Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the government report that says that the R-value, COVID infection rate, has reached 1.7 and what this means for the coming second wave and what the government may need to do about it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, we've had a bit of an all week in politics, haven't we? And I'm going to sort of try and cover one aspect of it in each video today. So we started out last week wondering if, that week's Brexit talks would be the ones where the UK actually handed over some proposals for a genuine free trade agreement that Boris Johnson says he wants, and ended up with him attracting global condemnation, including from the United States, who cannot understand what the hell we are doing. And on COVID news, we had Matt Hancock saying that the measures the government had put in place were looking good for us avoiding a second wave. And now we're not even questioning the fact that this is on its way. The only question that people have is, well, should we call it a wave or should we just call it a spike or another peak? What everyone is calling it is trouble. In terms, we have gone from a situation where Matt Hancock says, yes, we're absolutely, people are pointing, oh, what about going on in France? What's been going on in all these other European countries? We're really well set to avoid this because of the work we've put in. Days later, now in terms of the government's official R figures towards the end of last week, they're produced on a regional basis, which is useful. And the overall figures for England was between 1 and 1.2. Now, if we take the midpoint of each range regionally, on average, because some of those ranges went from 0.9 to 1.2-ish. But if you took the midpoint, then every single region in England had an R value in excess of 1. We could tell from the data anyway that overall, the overall picture is over the 1. But again, regionally, it was possible that there were some regions where it was less than 1. That doesn't seem to be the case. Now, to be clear about what the R value is for those who are unsure, it represents the number of people that someone who is infected will infect. So if it's less than 1, it means that for each person that becomes infected, on average, they'll infect less than one other person. If the R value is over 1, then it means on average you're going to infect more than another person. So your current cohort of infected people, if the R value is over 1, it means that in a week's time there's going to be more cases and it's going to keep rising and rising. So an R value of over 1 means that each infected person will, on average, infect more than another one. You are adding to the sum total. So even when you are recovered, hopefully, you've contributed to more than just one other person getting it. So we have an R value of over 1. We've not exactly taken corrective action to address this either. At least not medically advised corrective action. We are told that the number of cases is rising exponentially. We can sort of see this. The pattern is very much like France's 3 weeks ago. We are basically in the same place that France was 3 weeks ago. We are lagging 3 weeks behind, much as we did during the first wave. And you can sort of see where they are now. And it's very important to note at the moment here, and I say in England, but we could say that the whole UK in general as well, it's a similar pattern because the bulk of people live in England, but it is rising elsewhere as well. We could sort of say, well, at the moment, it's not as bad as it was during the first wave, so maybe we can keep it down. Just look at France. France now has figures way worse than during their first wave. We're getting up to the point where it's roundabout, quite similar to where it was in the first wave, and we're just following that pattern. Now, the good news is that in France, where it does differ with the first wave, is the number of deaths has not massively exploded. Of course, it has risen. And, so although the number of new cases is worse than the first peak, the number of deaths is way lower. And that's because in France, just as in the UK, and because this trend, like I say, isn't just England, the rise in infections is being driven largely by younger people. Those people the government told to go on holiday, to go to the office, to go to pubs and to go to restaurants. In fact, despite public health experts saying that dining out is the worst thing you can do during a pandemic, the government didn't just let people eat out, they paid half their bill to do so. That, of course, makes for a rise in infections almost certain for two reasons. I'll go through the two reasons first, and I'll go through my thoughts. So the first one, of course, is that people are going to be in a space surrounded by strangers, and strangers walking past them all the time, not wearing face masks, and with insufficient ventilation. You're almost certainly indoors. Not all restaurants are indoors, but most of them are. Secondly, the promotion actively incentivized restaurants to pack in as many customers as they thought they could get away with, to make as much money as they could before. Well, a number of things. First of all, the promotion was time limited, so they knew they only had a certain amount of time to capitalise on it. Secondly, they also don't know when they're going to face a close down again. You know, if we have a national or a regional lockdown, they're the first to have to close. They've already had months of not being able to make any money. Here they've got an opportunity to make hay while the sun shines. So this government campaign actively encouraged people to put themselves in that situation. And the other reason why you're sort of told dining out is the worst thing to do is because you don't need to do it. No one needs to do it. But either way, I mean, what it meant was that restaurants were not being encouraged to take sensible steps. That is not to say that all restaurants behaved recklessly. I'm absolutely certain, and I've seen evidence that some have actually still taken things seriously, but the sector as a whole did not. And now you've got people wondering on social media, oh, I see there's a bit of a link here with going out to restaurants and this rise in COVID. Is this surprising to you? Really? Now, in response to the rise in infections, the government immediately did two things in order to get on top of the situation, as you'd expect in any dynamic government. So the first step, very, very urgent, they did this straight away, is they blamed young people. And then the second thing they do is they banned gatherings of more than 6 people unless there was money changing hands. So you're still allowed to go to the restaurants and the pubs and all the rest of it. You're just not allowed, like I've talked before, to have your dinner party if there's going to be more than 6 guests. And this is very upsetting for the Tory backbenchers. Obviously, this fails to address the actual causes identified in the report as being the major drivers of the rise in infections. It could almost be seen as the government doing something futile just so that they could pretend they were doing something and the infection rate just keeps rising. Then they would say, well, people will just go, well, they're trying, they're doing the best, but you know what? It's a virus at the end of the day. What can the government do? They're doing their best. Because we've had this, it worked for them during the first wave. Lots of people just going, well, no one else would have done any better. It's like, what? Really? And the problem is, in this case, of course, that even this token effort to react to the exponential increase in infections wasn't token enough for Conservative MPs. Look, Prime Minister, I know you're only trying to look like you're doing something about COVID, but the problem is that it's playing merry hell with my bridge night. News has been emerging over the sort of last week and over the weekend about cabinet ministers essentially being against these plans. They were against these plans to reduce the size of gatherings, and that even Boris Johnson was not keen. That's what the reports were saying. The media were trying to paint it as this was Matt Hancock, and only Matt Hancock was in favour, which seems unlikely, as there's no chance that he would be able to get something like this implicated if only he were in favour. The Prime Minister, you can understand. The Prime Minister can go against the wishes of Cabinet. They can stand alone and go, no, we're doing this because they're in charge. Matt Hancock is not. There were things he wanted to do at the start of the crisis, for example, that he was overruled on by the same people who are now apparently going, well, we're not in favour, but all right, Matt, do what you want. And it's not like his power has grown since. So I don't believe that. I think that's just them trying to absolve themselves of blame. But the point is that this token effort, at a piss-poor effort to slow down the rate of infection, is actually resulting in a backbench rebellion. I mean, if reports are to be believed, and sometimes they can exaggerate the situation, it's an even stronger rebellion than against the government wanting to break the bloody law. Now, this is the situation we're in. It's like, look, Boris, okay, we're not happy with you breaking international law, but, if you must, you must. But this gatherings thing is ridiculous. Have your priorities set straight, will you? Now, as I say, you know, the reports could be downplaying one rebellion and overestimate another, depending on the particular angle the newspaper would like to take. But if it's true, you know, that is the Conservative Parliamentary Party essentially saying, look, you know, we're okay with you breaking an international treaty and making the country look ridiculous, making it impossible to get, you know, trade deals with the US and with the EU. You know, our largest export markets, but for heaven's sake, you are knackering our dinner parties. And the icing on the cake for me was to hear a Conservative MP saying that they should have more scrutiny over the measure that the government applies. So they were saying, look, you know, the government's putting this in place, we're not very happy with it, we should be involved in the process. And I think, well, you voted to not have any scrutiny over it. I mean, absolutely. Parliament should be scrutinising and voting on these measures. Certain emergency measures that have to be implemented immediately. Okay, yeah, government was right to have emergency powers to do that. But then Parliament, once it's got the time, should be able to debate them and then vote on them. Whether do they still want them in place? You've acted in haste. You've put something in place because it was an emergency situation. Fine. Now Parliament can discuss it. Does it still want it in place? Does it agree with it? All these Conservative MPs who are chuntering, all they have to do to make it happen is support a motion and vote in favour of it to take that power. In fact, the emergency powers that Boris Johnson took for himself are supposed to be being reviewed round about nowish anyway. I can't remember exactly what date. All they have to do is go, right, no, we've not been happy with the way you've been using these, so no, we're taking charge again. That's it. It's their right. It's their right to scrutinise anything the government does, and it's their right to vote on it. And that's what they should be doing. Democratically, Parliament should absolutely take the lead in COVID, not leaving it to the government. But even politically, let the Conservative Party own the COVID response. They should be involved, because what we don't want to see, what I don't want to see, is the leadership getting the blame, because once they dispense with that leadership, whenever it suits them, you know, what are we supposed to do? Oh, well, it was all those people's fault. It was Boris's fault. It was Matt's fault. It was Dominic's fault. It was all their fault. But we've got a new lot in now. They're all right. No, make the whole Conservative Party take ownership of this. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.